Hi, my name is Aurora Lee. So I am sitting here on unceded Syilx territory. Really grateful to kind of just chat about connecting with women and growing a community of women together. So my background is in anthropology. I really wanted to study wellness and cultures, especially relating to healing and what did it mean to have healthy and well cultures. When I started working with women, I was the Stopping the Violence counselor, and it was really interesting for me because I noticed women weren't coming forward in the community, and I started to kind of ask that social research question as to why weren't they coming forward to access services when the rates of domestic violence were so big. And I started to see that actually, how supported are women, or how they treated when they do come forward? Is it safe to come forward? Or what happens when there's an abuse or violence and trauma? Usually the abuser will ensure that psychologically that person doesn't want to express, so that their voice doesn't get shared. Because if a person is liberated and their self-esteem is there and they're connected to their voice, then that would be a threat to that person's getting away with that abuse. And so I noticed that if culturally we kind of blanket women, we support women, we come together and honor them for coming forward, and we show that it's safe to, that then people can start to do that. And the rates of domestic violence through COVID increased incredibly in such a large statistic that was very alarming. And so when people are kept together, their kind of power dynamics surface. So I started to research power dynamics in general and healthy forms of power. And so that idea of liberation is very connected to power. That idea of expressing your voice is very connected to power. And when women can be empowered, I think that our communities will heal in such a large way, because women are also taking care of like the girls and the boys, right? The children. So much of the time they're that fire for the community. And the men are very important. They're the fire pit. They're the fire pit, right? They're the protectors and the guardians of the women and children. Kind of historically, and culturally, that's the case. And so it's very important to talk about the men's role as well. But I've decided to start kind of a women's kind of group online, and I'm really excited about it because it can be a shared space for healing, exploring what is the healing journey, kind of looking at that, and having that support is huge. I think in North America, we've lost that idea of a guide, whereas culturally there would be a guide, for people to go through a healing journey. People could have touch points with that person. We do have it in counseling, but I think that it's more limited in some cases because we still need that community feel, right? And I've noticed that a lot. And there's actually a social mammal wiring that we have to heal together as well. It's a unique wiring versus our own individual process with another person. Interpersonally, there's a community aspect to healing and being seen and being heard, and when you start to see women advocate for themselves and have compassion for themselves and validate themselves, and this hope comes across their face and this lightness, like that brings me a lot of joy in life. Yeah. That's cool. And when I go and do the music healing shows, I really love those because sometimes people don't realize that there's a part of them that's dormant, and that part of them has just been used to being a bit silenced or judged, or when they step out of their shell, ridiculed. A lot of women hold this too much story, am I too much? And I think that leaves a person feeling unfulfilled because there's always this part that they want to express and they maybe haven't tapped into. And so in the music shows that I do, I really love witnessing people trying to come through in a new way and seeing that it's safe and then being heard by a group of people. And even if they're not ready to talk yet, it plants seeds when they see other people sharing. And then maybe they feel courageous to start a healing journey as well, or access resources in their community as well. The music healing show is, I've recorded 15 different songs. So a lot of it's from my own journey, my own healing journey. I found writing was my safe way to come out of my freeze response or my trauma, and silencing that I went through as well. I had some really violent, traumatic events happen in early childhood and as young as 3 and moving forward. But I didn't really recognize it till I was older, and I could come out of survival a bit, and then I was able to face those parts. And I could tell that they were there, they were kind of locked in, and I needed to work with them to free up, but I had enough awareness on somatics, polyvagal theory, attachment theory. Because I had the knowledge, I was able to recognize when the freeze response would come in, and it was preventing me from being my authentic self, being my liberated self. So all of a sudden I started writing these songs and feeling a lot more freedom, relief, like, oh wow. And actually I was curiously exploring what was coming through too. So I was learning about myself in the process. And then these songs kind of represent a lot of different things that go on for people in lives. And we know that, and we can see that within communities. And so I put together all of these songs, whether it was domestic violence, human trafficking, mental health, addictions. I witnessed a few people pass that were very close to me to addictions, and there's battle with that, and understanding that underneath all of that is pain. And we know now that the antidote for addictions is connection and love. And so for us to come together like all of our ancestors did, when there was crisis, we would just come together. It wasn't about filling out a form and accessing services in this kind of more Western way. We would just be together. And so that itch that almost needs to be scratched of love and connection is never fully fulfilled, especially for those who have isolated more due to shame. There's a lot of shame connecting to addiction. Fear, right? Fear of stigmatization, fear of abandonment or rejection, or taking off the mask, will I still be loved, right? And we can learn that quite small. And so these spaces to just talk about these things in a really liberated way can help people to see that they're not alone. And I think that's the number one thing for me, and
that's huge.
When we see suicides, when we see people that really feel alone, they aren't seeing that there's a community fire anymore. I know that when I go to that fire, there'll be people there, right? They don't necessarily have that, then they're seeking it, I think. And to be that lighthouse in the fog, I think all of us can do that with acts of kindness. But just in small ways, I think that this music healing show has been really fulfilling to be able to start, and so far it's been really good. I hope to go on tour soon again. So a music healing show is kind of like a sharing circle, but with the setup of being a musician and having an audience, and then pretty soon you see that we're actually in a sharing circle for those who want to participate. And so I'll do an introduction, and I might introduce a song, tell a story on a song, and then I ask the audience if anyone wants to share of how any parts of that kind of resonate for them, or if they have seen that in their own lives, and how they want to express it. So it's whatever is on people's hearts and minds then come through, just like in a sharing circle. And so throughout that, there's different topics, and I really weave it like a healing curve, and I'm very cognizant of the songs that are more triggering, right? And I have really regulative songs that help bring people back home to themselves too throughout. And then we ended in a really strong way of encouragement and support and there'll be people in the space as well where they are community members, they might be elders, they might be counselors, they might be victim services workers, people have come forward and shared about assaults that they've been through, like within the show, and then there's the follow-up care. And then there's also the workshops that can happen throughout as well. If I do just a show, then that's great, but also it can be done through the weekend, and I have varying workshops, so then people can participate in those workshops throughout the weekend. So the school community that I started was so that it's not me just entering communities and then I'm gone, right? And so people bond in those spaces. They let down their guard in those spaces. They see the humanness in others in those spaces. They see, oh, wow, the way that they shared that, like I now identify with that in such a new way, but I didn't know they went through that too, right? And so when there's that emotional connection, it's really important to maintain, and it can be hard in our busy lives, right? And so I started the school community so that there can be shared people with shared interests going on a healing journey. So somatic regeneration is something that I mixed modalities together in an integrative way. So throughout my younger years, I really studied deeply into different healing modalities from all around the world. For myself, I mean, that was a way for me to heal my complex PTSD, was to try it myself and have that lived experience of what I found worked or didn't work. But I also studied it in my anthropology degrees, cross-cultural perspectives on healing, and I ended up doing healing work then as well, but I took a step back to also learn a lot of the Western way so I could bring that in. So the somatics, the polyvagal theory, the attachment theory, and to be able to weave together kind of those more traditional healing methods with the Western and that somatic regeneration. And I'm really excited to be able to offer that to people. It's kind of like when you go to a naturopath, you have an intake. We do an intake together, there's a questionnaire, we kind of get a snapshot of historical events and timelines, but also core beliefs that may be occurring. Like, it really gives a powerful map to start the healing journey. And I think that that's what I would have needed when I was healing from complex PTSD. Everything was scattered, right? You're finding information here and there and everywhere. And so through my journey of research for 15 years, in that realm of healing and what does that mean, I've kind of put this together so that people can feel like they're held in a container and there's wisdom in that. And it's not like it's the only way, but it is a way, and it's an opportunity for us to have a shared discussion and really go deep, truly go deep. And then we also map out healing modalities and figure out what aligns best for that person. And so then they can come back for touch points if they want or not, but it's just a really useful session. And then if we do sessions together, like healing sessions, that's based on the intake. So if it came up that more somatic practices, breath work, maybe music healing, maybe Reiki, maybe some narrative, some inner child work, like whatever comes up for that person that's fitting, then we work on that. A lot of us have an inner child story, an aspect where for some they always belonged, right? They had unconditional love. They didn't have to hide parts of themselves in order to connect and be okay. But those are the lucky ones. That's beautiful. That's great. And for a lot of us, that's not the case. Whether it was at school or in our family homes, we may have had to mask parts of ourselves in order to be accepted or approved of. And I think that when people start to bump up against these parts, they see it in their lives. Like, why is my dreams not fulfilling? Why is this happening? There's muffled parts that we're not even conscious of. So what people can start to see and shift right away is that when they're truly living authentically and able to be liberated, they may discover that deep within, what they truly want is something other than what they've been living. Because our mask parts can become so much a part of our identity that we don't even realize that it's not our authentic expression of what we truly want. And then we wonder why we're still unfulfilled, right? And so to live fulfilled, how do you bottle that up? How do you bottle up contentment and peace? It's a way of being because we're able to actually be who we truly are with self-determination. Well, first we have to just make friends with our mask, right? And identify it and be aware of it. And metacognition is it's a big skill and competency to grow. It's being the observer of self. It's being the observer of thoughts. It's being the observer of sensations. So that's something that I have an online course to help to develop those competencies through. You know, this idea of right and wrong and good and bad. When did I learn those things? Who taught me those things? Is that truly there and available to me to liberate from? Is it actually needed? You know, family conditioning and patterns can make us think, well, that's just the way it is. And then we're stifling ourselves because that's not really true. It becomes its own box, right? And so when we just make friends with the process, we're not like against it. We're not fighting against our mask. You know, I can be aware of my mask. My first show I did, it was like a filled theater. I was shaking, but because I knew what was going on, I was scared of being seen. I was scared that my abuser wouldn't want me to be seen. Like all of these things, I was aware of it though, because I'd built that ability. And so if I was in a freeze response, I could work with it. I wasn't going to fight against it. And I think that when people are crippled by their mask, it's because they're fighting against it or they're just being obedient to it. And then there's a dissonance. But when we can understand it and we can work with it and we ask, well, what did you need at that time? What do you need? You know, I've developed an app for talking with your inner child through AI. And it's actually pretty neat because it's an ability to gain meta awareness faster than it actually takes. Because as we know, like in cultures that have really sat with meditation practices and these disciplines of growing this ability, it takes many years, right? And so there are tools that can help that process. And I think that that's important, especially nowadays, you know, with the rates of mental health and where people are struggling with anxiety and depression. Those are symptoms, but they're symptoms of pain, right? I believe that we have to stop pathologizing people because they're not sick because they're inherently sick or unwell because they're inherently unwell. They're having a natural response to whatever it is that they've been through and are going through. And so when we can acknowledge and validate people and to say, yeah, it's actually quite normal that there's 50% of people are taking antidepressants, given the state of the world, given what they've been through. Most people have been in the child-rearing days, I'll reframe that. A lot of people have, as babies, experienced the cry-out method because a doctor told parents at that time that that was ideal. Right? And so this deep-rooted primal fear is still underlying in a lot of people's psyche, right? And so that terror of being left alone when a baby isn't able to regulate itself yet. And so now the rates of anxiety and depression are totally correlated to that, in my belief. So when people just feel not okay, it's because it's in their sensory nervous system. And so how do you somatically release that? And that's really, really important work. What excites me and liberates me and is the driver of all of the things that I do is that really if we have a healing culture, if we have a culture that has this lexicon, this diverse language, that's a shared understanding of what it means to heal, and we're talking about it, we're communicating about it, you know, in our own different ways. And it's actually a culture that wants to be well. I don't think we've chosen that right now. We're an unwell society, you know, social researchers say like this is an unwell society. And so it'd be nice, I would love to see, and that would excite me to see that we're a well society or moving towards that because we're willing to heal. But we're still not quite there. We're almost there. I think we're at the tipping point, and I think it's going to come, and that excites me. So I created this actually pre-COVID. It was something that I had learned I did myself, and I teach now in different ways this unlearning and relearning journey. And so in order to take off the mask, first we have to go through this, what I call the precipice, the willingness to unlearn. And that's the hardest part of the whole curve. Because then we get through and we get to the void, and that's where we are willing to not know. We know that we don't know. There's something we don't know, and it's uncomfortable, because we don't know yet what we're learning. And so in the healing journey, it's much like the hero's journey, right? So the hero sets out, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. They set out and they're exploring and they're reckoning with themselves. And then they come back and they're able to tell their story after. And so this arc I created through researching diverse cultures around the world and healing, and what were the similarities, so it's a very universalized approach to the healing journey. It honors people, whatever their diverse culture, whatever their religion, their faith, and it blends that Western and spiritual aspect, just like the somatic regeneration does. But people can take that to do deep self-inquiry and do the unlearning and then the relearning. And what's interesting is that once you go to the relearning part, you're and you come to that new phase, you kind of are going, who am I now, right? And there's an important guidance that's also required at those stages. And that's where I see a lot of folks doing the incredible work. But then go, well, how do I contribute this now to the world? And so there's this whole phase of what's my role in the world and service in the world, and how am I showing up now, my new self? And so that's also supported. So you're supported the whole way through with this online course, which is really, I think, really great. I estimate 3 to 4 months if done willingly, but it can be opened up for people's process and needs, because when a person all of a sudden bumps up against something maybe really challenging, whether it's a mother wound, a father wound, an event that occurred, they may need more time and care. They may need more processing somewhere with a counselor. So it's really giving that grace that people can re-enter again when they need to. And that's why just having the free community, like the community itself is free, right? And people get that connection with everyone, and they can then, once they're in the course, they can go at their own pace. I just really, encourage people wherever they're at on their journey to know that they're worthy of being loved and loving themselves and being treated well and being able to articulate their needs to ensure that, in all areas of their life. So I just want to encourage people to, show up and be authentic. Whatever that means, that's what we need in the world now, is people being authentic, and that's beautiful.